The unsettling admission. The room was quiet, an eerie hush that fell over the Galactic Council as the council members took their seats in the Grand Chamber. This space station, floating within the heart of an uncharted nebula, was the designated gathering point for all member species of the Council, a place where the largest decisions in the galaxy were made. The structure was vast, shimmering with holographic panels that projected the intricate map of the known universe, its corridors lined with light pulses as if to reflect the intensity of the conversations that took place within its walls. However, today, the weight of that atmosphere seemed thicker, heavier. The usual hum of chatter was absent, replaced by the feeling of uncertainty that permeated the very air. The council had convened for what should have been a routine meeting, but this was far from an ordinary day. The humans, an upstart species that had only recently entered the galactic stage, had been officially admitted into the ranks of the Galactic Council, a decision that had sent ripples throughout the galaxy. Some species, particularly those from the older, more established empires, had questioned the wisdom of bringing humanity into the fold. Yet, their resilience, resourcefulness, and unexpected brilliance in the face of adversity had won over many who had doubted their place among the stars. It was now time to address the aftermath of that monumental decision. Humanity's role in the larger galactic community. And most importantly, the strange figure who had risen as humanity's representative, the one known only as Ilaran, whose presence at the council table had unsettled even the most stoic members. Ilaran's method of communication was peculiar, to say the least. He spoke only one phrase, "I understand." Yet with those words, he seemed to convey an understanding so profound that it left others speechless, unsure of how to respond. At the head of the table sat Speaker Vint, a being of the ancient and revered Rilla species. His elegant form, draped in flowing robes, radiated calm. Vint had long been a figure of wisdom, and his leadership had been the guiding force in the decision to admit the humans to the council. His soft, melodic voice filled the room, addressing the assembly. "We are gathered here today not to discuss the details of the humans' technology or their ability to adapt to the universe. We know their potential. What we must now consider is something more subtle, more profound. We must ask ourselves, what does it mean to truly accept the humans into the council? What is it that we are inviting into our midst?" Vint paused, letting his words settle into the minds of the council members. The chamber was filled with a chorus of soft murmurs as representatives from various species exchanged glances. Each of them, whether they admitted it or not, had their doubts about humanity's place in the galaxy. Yes, they had displayed resilience and adaptability, but their strange ways of communicating, their unpredictable nature, it all felt like a wild card in the grand tapestry of galactic politics. Most alien species valued clarity, directness, and mutual understanding in diplomacy. Humans, however, operated on a different level. And it was this difference that made them both intriguing and dangerous. One by one, the council members began to speak. Ambassador Thrin, a member of the Mullaru species, a race of large mollusk-like creatures, was the first to express concern. His voice was deep and deliberate, the tone reflective of the Mullaru's careful nature. "I have studied the humans closely," Thrin said, his voice resonating within the chamber. "Their culture is chaotic. Their methods are inefficient. They fight amongst themselves. They war over petty differences. Their societies are in constant flux. How can we trust a species so disorganized to contribute meaningfully to the stability of the galaxy?" Speaker Vint did not respond immediately. Instead, he let the words hang in the air, aware that many shared Thrin's concerns. But he also understood that humans were unlike any species they had encountered. Their chaotic nature, as Thrin described it, might very well be the source of their strength. They were not bound by tradition, by the weight of millennia of history that constrained many of the other races. They had the freedom to innovate, to think beyond the constraints of the established order. It was that untamed creativity that made humanity both a threat and an asset. Vint raised his hand, signaling for silence. Yes, their society is imperfect. But in their imperfections, they have demonstrated the ability to adapt, to overcome. Their greatest strength lies not in their technology, but in their willpower, in their ability to push forward despite the odds. A quiet hum of agreement rippled through the room, but still, the unease lingered. At the far end of the table, Tuvok, a sharp-eyed, calculating representative of a species known for their strategic brilliance, shifted in his seat. His appearance was almost insectoid, his mandibles clicking softly as he spoke. "Speaker Vint, you speak of the human strength in adversity. But I have observed something troubling. There is one among them, this Ilaran. His silence, his constant refrain of 'I understand.' It is unsettling. In a galaxy that values communication, his lack of explanation creates tension. How can we move forward when there is one among us who speaks so little, yet conveys so much? This is not a method we can afford to embrace." The chamber fell silent again, and all eyes turned to Ilaran, who sat at the far side of the table. His posture was straight, his hands folded in front of him, and his face remained calm and impassive. Unlike most representatives, who wore elaborate attire to signify their species status, Ilaran wore simple human clothes, a symbol of his species' humble beginnings. Yet there was something about him that commanded attention, something in his presence that made everyone around him uneasy. Ilaran's gaze slowly lifted from the table, meeting the eyes of each council member in turn. Then, as if on cue, he spoke, his voice soft but undeniably clear. "I understand." Those two words reverberated through the chamber like a wave, echoing in the minds of everyone present, the simplicity of the phrase, the depth of its meaning. It was impossible to ignore. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, each species, each representative, trying to decipher the weight behind those words. Was this some form of hidden intelligence, a deeper understanding of the galaxy that Ilaran and humanity alone possessed? Or was it merely a trick of perception? Was humanity truly as enigmatic as they appeared, or were they simply too unpredictable to trust? Ambassador Thrin shifted uneasily in his seat. "What do you understand, Ilaran?" he asked, his voice laced with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "What is it that you know, that the rest of us do not?" Ilaran's expression remained unchanged, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a subtle acknowledgement of the question. He leaned forward, his voice steady as he spoke again. "I understand that in this galaxy there are forces greater than any one species, forces that shape the destiny of all. But I also understand that the greatest power lies not in strength, not in weapons, but in the ability to listen and to learn." The council members were silent. Ilaran's words, though simple, were profound. The room was thick with contemplation, the weight of the human statement settling heavily over the proceedings. There was a truth in what he said, one that few had ever fully grasped. Speaker Vint broke the silence with a nod. "Indeed," he said, his voice calm and resonant. "The humans have much to teach us, perhaps more than we are ready to learn." As the conversation continued, one thing became clear to all. Humanity, in its quiet, humble way, had already begun to change the fabric of the galaxy. And whether they were ready or not, the galaxy would have to reckon with the one who only said, "I understand." The silent weight of understanding. As the chambers of the Galactic Council filled with murmurs and soft discussions, the air seemed thick with the unspoken. The words, "I understand," lingered in the room like a shadow, pressing against the walls, filling the spaces between every species represented at the table. For the first time in the history of the Council, the source of this discomfort wasn't a threat of war, an external enemy, or political strife. It was a single human, whose silence and simplicity seemed to have tapped into something far deeper, far more unsettling. Speaker Vint had remained unusually still after Ilaran's statement. Normally, the speaker's expression was calm, a serene mask of diplomatic composure, but today there was something different in his eyes. Perhaps it was the weight of the decision he had made, admitting the humans to the council. Perhaps it was the realization that this species, so young, so unpredictable, would challenge everything the galaxy had come to know about power, diplomacy, and peace. The chamber slowly quieted as the delegates turned their attention back to the speaker. For the first time, no one seemed eager to continue the debate. The subject had taken a turn into deeper waters, and every mind in the room, alien or human, was trying to process the implications of what had just transpired. "I must admit," said Thrin, his voice almost apologetic in tone, "that I, for one, am baffled by this understanding that Iluran speaks of. Can you explain it, Speaker Vint? Is it really as simple as his words seem?" Speaker Vint took a long, steady breath before replying, his voice low and thoughtful. "In the years I have served as speaker, I have come to learn that the most profound truths are often the simplest, and perhaps that is the power of humanity. They are not bound by centuries of tradition, nor by the weight of ancient ideologies. They have the ability to see things from a fresh perspective, unclouded by the history of our species. They do not need to elaborate endlessly to communicate their meaning. Sometimes silence speaks louder than the most carefully crafted speech." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. They were, each one of them, products of cultures that valued elaborate ceremonies, grandiose rhetoric, and extensive dialogue. For a species to communicate with so few words was unsettling. Yet, despite the discomfort, a seed of curiosity began to grow in the hearts of many delegates. If humanity could see things in a way that others could not, what could they teach the galaxy? What was it about their silence that held such power? Tuvok, ever the strategist, leaned forward with a sharp gaze, his mandibles clicking in a rhythmic pattern. "But it is not just about words, is it? It is about actions. And yet, we have seen no grand show of force from the humans. Their technology is primitive, their military relatively unremarkable compared to our own. How can they bring anything to the table when they are so new?" Speaker Vint nodded slowly, acknowledging the point. Perhaps they are new. But there is something extraordinary in their approach to conflict and cooperation. I have witnessed their resilience firsthand. They face obstacles that would break other species, yet they adapt. They change. They learn. A soft hum filled the room as the council members processed these words. It wasn't as though the humans lacked strength. They had fought wars, survived crises, and thrived in environments that many thought inhospitable. Yet it was their adaptability, their ability to navigate the unknown with an unshakable resolve, that seemed to unsettle the council. They were a species that refused to be boxed in, and that refusal was a challenge to the galaxy's established order. Iluran, still silent, watched the council with an intensity that seemed to draw at every gaze in the room. He wasn't arrogant, nor was he dismissive of the questions and concerns raised by the other species. He simply watched and listened, the faintest hint of a smile playing at the corners of his lips. There was an air of patience about him, an unspoken understanding that transcended words. The humans, it seemed, were willing to wait. They would prove themselves in time. And as the days passed, the council members couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps this was the key to humanity's success, something they had never considered. The humans didn't rush into things. They were deliberate, calculating. They understood the value of patience, of listening before reacting. The galaxy had always been driven by those who sought to conquer, to dominate, to control. But humanity's greatest strength lay in the willingness to simply understand. As the meeting continued, Speaker Vint invited each representative to voice their thoughts on the matter. The discussion turned to trade, resources, and how the humans could contribute to the greater good of the galaxy. Yet every time someone spoke of humanity's capabilities, they returned to that simple phrase, "I understand." It was becoming clear that Iluran's words weren't just a platitude. They were a challenge. A challenge to think differently, to approach problems from angles that had never been considered. And while some of the council members found this unsettling, Others began to see the wisdom in it. Ravani, a representative from the arena, a highly intelligent, web-weaving species, spoke up. Perhaps we are too quick to dismiss them. The humans, in their silence, have made us question our approach. Our species has always relied on extensive studies, exhaustive data. But what if the answer lies in trusting our instincts, in embracing the unknown? What if, in their simplicity, the humans have already discovered something profound? This sparked a ripple of murmurs throughout the room as more representatives began to consider the implications of Ravani's words. Could it be that humanity had uncovered a truth that the galaxy's oldest and most advanced species had missed? At the far end of the table, Ilaran remained calm, his eyes soft yet piercing. He knew that the council was beginning to understand, albeit slowly. The humans didn't need to dominate the galaxy with force. They didn't need to overwhelm the council with their achievements. Instead, they could simply listen, adapt, and contribute in their own quiet, subtle way. And in that moment, a realization began to settle over the room. Humanity's place in the council wasn't about their strength, their technology, or their weapons. It was about their unique ability to understand, to bring clarity where there was confusion, to bridge gaps where others had built walls. As Speaker Vent closed the meeting with a thoughtful nod, he addressed the assembly one last time. Perhaps in time, we will see that humanity is not just a species among many. Perhaps they are the key to unlocking something greater, something we have overlooked in our pursuit of power and knowledge. I think we must ask ourselves one final question. Are we ready to listen? And with those words, the room fell into a deep, contemplative silence. The hidden power of silence. The days following the Galactic Council's meeting were heavy with contemplation. Speaker Vent had set the stage for an unusual, unexpected turn in the intergalactic discourse, one where humanity's greatest strength was not their military might, not their technology, but their ability to listen, to understand. The council was beginning to question everything they thought they knew about power, communication, and even the very essence of civilization itself. But not everyone was convinced. Tensions had shifted, and some species, especially those whose societies were built on centuries of tradition and protocol, couldn't let go of their biases. Among them was Tuvok, the calculating and cautious representative of the voluntary, a highly advanced species known for their war strategies and rigid, structured approach to politics. His belief in the power of direct action, of strategy and overwhelming force, was a cornerstone of his ideology. Now, as he sat at his private desk in the voluntary embassy, reviewing the notes from the recent council meeting, his thoughts were clouded with doubt. The humans, their silence, their simplicity, it's maddening. Tuvok muttered under his breath as he scanned through the data logs. How can we trust them when they barely speak? How can we rely on a species that understands without saying anything? His mind raced, replaying the words of Speaker Vent. Perhaps humanity's strength lies in their ability to understand, to listen, and to adapt. Tuvok's mandibles clicked irritably as he recalled Ilaran's enigmatic phrase, "I understand." It echoed in his thoughts like an unshakable whisper. How could such an absurdly simple phrase cause so much unrest among the galaxy's finest minds? It was as though the humans had unlocked a secret they were not willing to share. Or worse, a secret they didn't even know they possessed. The voluntary had relied on clear, concise communication for millennia. Every word mattered. Every strategic move calculated to perfection. They believed in directness, and every negotiation or decision was made with the intention to win, to dominate. But humanity, their methods were abstract, indirect, and maddeningly simple. Ilaran had sat in the council meeting, speaking little, yet each utterance seemed to leave the room shaken, uncertain. The tension in Tuvok's mind had become a constant companion as he left his office and walked to the grand observation deck. The view from the deck was breathtaking. The vast expanse of the galaxy stretched out before him, dotted with billions of stars. His eyes narrowed as he thought about the humans' presence on the council, their unassuming yet quietly powerful influence growing with each passing day. Back at the council chamber, the mood was a stark contrast to Tuvok's private reflection. The other species, those not as set in their ways as the voluntary, had started to acknowledge the subtler power of humanity's presence. A few had even gone so far as to invite human representatives to their stations, seeking to understand more about how a species so young, so inexperienced in galactic politics, could possess such an undeniable gravitational pull. And among them was Speaker Vint, who had come to appreciate the calm, almost meditative quality of humanity's communication. Vint had always considered himself an open-minded leader, but the more he observed Ilaran, the more he was convinced that humanity's approach was something entirely different, perhaps even something superior. The Relay had long been a species of peacekeepers, known for their ability to mediate between warring factions, yet even they had never encountered a race that communicated so effortlessly without the need for dominance, force, or endless verbal sparring. It was late in the cycle when Speaker Vint called another impromptu gathering of the council. The stars outside the station gleamed like jewels, but inside, the air was thick with a quiet tension. This meeting would not be about trade or defense, but about something more fundamental, something the council had never truly considered. How could they, the most advanced beings in the universe, learn from a species so young, so seemingly chaotic? The representatives filed into the chamber, each species seated in their designated places, their eyes watchful. When Ilaran entered, there was no fanfare, no grand announcement. He simply walked in, took his seat, and waited. For a moment, the council members seemed uncertain. Would he speak today? Would he finally reveal the mysteries that surrounded him? Ilaran's silence felt like a weight in the room, and yet it was oddly calming. His presence seemed to command respect, not through his words, but through the space he occupied. He sat at ease, his hands folded in front of him, his eyes tracing the room. There was no anxiety, no rush, just an overwhelming sense of understanding. It was Ravani, the Arane ambassador, who broke the silence this time. "We have watched you, Ilaran. We have seen how you interact, how you listen, how you never rush to speak. You never try to impose your will on others. How do you do this? How do you come to understand so much without uttering a single word?" Ilaran remained calm, his expression impassive, but there was something in his eyes, something that suggested he had known this question was coming. Slowly, he leaned forward, and the council held its breath. "I understand," he said softly. There was a collective gasp from the table, though none dared speak it aloud. It was as if his words reached deeper than before. This time, they weren't just a passing phrase. It was as though everything in the room suddenly aligned, as though the very fabric of communication itself had been rearranged by a single quiet utterance. "I understand," Ilaran continued, his voice steady and deliberate, "that words are a tool, but they are not the only tool. Action, intention, perception, these are tools too. The true power lies in listening, in understanding what is not said as much as what is spoken." Speaker Vint could feel the weight of Ilaran's words settling deep into the council's collective psyche. The question they had all been dancing around was finally being addressed. They had long prided themselves on their power, on their technology, on their ability to control and command. And yet, here was a human, a species they had once considered beneath them, who had shown them the value of something simpler, something quieter. The realization was dawning on them. The galaxy's history had been shaped by force, by conquest, by dominance. The humans, in their quiet way, had shown them another path, a path where listening, understanding, and patience held as much weight as any weapon or treaty. Perhaps, Speaker Vint spoke slowly, his voice laden with a newfound understanding. The greatest strength is not in control, but in surrender. Not in dominance, but in humility. Perhaps humanity can teach us something we have overlooked for millennia. The council was silent, each member lost in their thoughts, contemplating the implications of this simple truth. How many times had they tried to force peace, to impose order, to conquer and subdue. How many times had they failed because they did not take the time to listen, to truly understand one another? Tuvok, still struggling with the implications of this, finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant. Are we to simply relinquish control, to let others lead by listening rather than acting? Ilaran met Tuvok's gaze, his expression unwavering. No, it is not about relinquishing control. It is about using a different kind of strength, the strength to listen, to understand first, then act. That is the true power. The words hung in the air, a quiet declaration that rippled through the room like a storm on the horizon, ready to change the course of the galaxy's future.